Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is 12 Gauge. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for showing up and giving my channel a try. If you're a returner, thank you again for coming in. P.S. Thank you for being here. I do talk in generalized terms, so I'm not talking about anybody or anything specific when it comes to the drama on these YouTube streets. I hope that you know that I try to stay drama free and I try to stick to the facts and not just talk about speculation. I try to provide evidence based theory or hypothesis that kind of goes along with the commentary um, that I'm trying to portray. So tonight I want to do the part two of Never Forget the Four, what the killer obsessed with death. And those of you that do understand the case of the IDAHO4, you do know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Brian Koberger. Last night I was talking about, you know, what type of person he was, what type of mindset he had, and basically took you into his life a little bit more where you could basically understand the type of living that this individual had. You know, a lot of times we hear about this person, but we have no real clue about who he was and what type of mentality he might have been creating in his own mind that could or could not have led him to commit these crimes. So tonight I want to continue on because I'm going to talk to you about the alibi. I'm going to talk to you about Occam's razor, and I'm going to talk to you about exculpatory evidence. So I'm going to continue to educate a little bit on the wordings of the criminal justice and law enforcement community. And I hope that you understand how I break it down to you and how I put it into this case. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the alibi. If you're not familiar with the alibi that was stated the other day was he was out driving around, he enjoys hiking, he enjoys stargazing, and he enjoys going to a park south of Pullman. It is called, um, I'm going to call it WWW. Way, I, I can't think of the next part. But let's call it WWW. So let's go ahead and begin with this video. The park in this video. It's called Alibi Revealed, 3 Surprising Details, and it's by Law and Crime. I give them the props in their video that I'm about to use and comment on based on fair use. So here we go.
Brian Koberger out stargazing and driving the night 4 University of Idaho students were murdered. That's part of the alibi he's offering to the court. I have 3 surprising details of what he's claiming and what it could mean for his defense. Thanks for joining me for Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. We've known for a while now that Brian Koberger claimed he was out driving the night the 4 students were murdered in that house on King Road. But now we have a little more detail about where Brian Koberger claimed he went and why. Koberger maintains he didn't murder Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle on November 13th, 2022. So he says he certainly wasn't at that house. Instead, his lawyer's right. Mr. Koberger was out driving in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, as he often did, to hike and run and or see the moon and stars. He drove.
Okay, so there it's in black and white. It says Mr. Koberger was out driving in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. This is when the murders occurred, as he often did to hike and run and to see the moon and the stars. You know, a lot of people have been fixated on this little part right here. Oh, he's out stargazing. He's out sitting under the stars and just um grabbing flowers and, you know, just blowing them into the wind. I don't believe that this is what this means. I believe that the individual was out hiking while enjoying the night sky. He drove throughout the area south of Pullman, west of Moscow, including Wellaway Park.
Drove throughout the area south of Pullman, Washington, west of Moscow, Idaho, including Wawai Park. In Idaho, if a defendant is going to claim they have an alibi, they have to tell the prosecutor about a specific place or places where they were when a crime took place. And they have to identify a witness or witnesses who can vouch for them. Here's what Judge John Judge told the defense about that last summer.
Well, the way I understand this is, and this is in the so-called alibi, not really an alibi, but, quote, he was out driving during the late night and early morning hours of November 12th to 13th, 2022.
So, interestingly enough, Koberger didn't identify any witnesses who can say, I saw Brian in that filing. So, Koberger has kind of offered an alibi. This is what I would call alibi ish. The filing also seeks to cast doubt on claims made by the prosecution in its probable cause affidavit. For instance, police had said Brian Koberger's cell phone was moving south through Pullman at 2:27 a.m. the morning of the murders, but then stopped reporting to cell networks until 4:48 a.m. That covers the time the murders are believed to have occurred. But Koberger claims his expert, Cy Ray, analyzed cell records and will testify that Brian Koberger's mobile device was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow, Idaho on November 13th, 2022, and that Brian.
So let's talk about that a second. It says Mr. Koberger intends to offer testimony of Cy Ray, an expert on cell tower, cell phone, and other radio frequency curriculum vitae is attached to show that Brian Koberger's mobile device was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow. So this individual is going to look into or had looked into the cell data, the metadata on the cell phone. On the 13th of 2022, the Brian Koberger's mobile device did not travel east on the Moscow-Pullman highway in the early morning hours of November 13th and thus could not be in the vehicle. Okay, so I don't know how much of that y'all heard. I was sitting there talking to myself, so here we go again. It says Mr. Koberger intends to offer testimony of Cy Ray, which is a cell phone expert based on cell towers, cell phone, and other radio frequency curriculum vitae, is attached to show that Brian Koberger's mobile device was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow, Idaho on November 13, 2022. That Brian Koberger's mobile device did not travel east on the Moscow Pullman Highway in the early morning hours of November 13th and thus could not be the vehicle captured on video along the Moscow Pullman Highway near Floyd's cannabis shop. So there's been other creators that have been focused on this. So there obviously was a vehicle that was spotted outside of Floyd's cannabis shop around this time frame. But the cell phone expert's gonna look into the evidence on Mr. Koberger's phone, the metadata, and be able to identify where this phone was and traveling. And he's gonna counteract the prosecution's claims that Mr. Koberger was heading west into Moscow, and he's going to show that he was heading east, going away from Moscow, going south of Pullman, Washington. So this is interesting stuff right here. And the defense did not speak of this until earlier when they were discussing certain things. Ann Taylor was quoted as saying, I'm going to show you that my client was nowhere near Moscow when the murders were taking place. And I guess this is what she was talking about. So let's continue on.
Brian Koberger's mobile device did not travel east on the Moscow-Pullman highway in the early morning hours of November 13th, and thus could not be the vehicle captured on the video along the Moscow-Pullman highway near Floyd's cannabis shop. Now, in this notice of alibi, Koberger explains how he moved to Washington from Pennsylvania in June of 2022 and was an avid runner and hiker, so he'd often explore the area, often late at night. One place he frequented was Hawaii Park near Pullman, where he was a student at Washington State University. So, what does all of this mean for Brian Koberger's case? With me to discuss that is Andy Wilson. He is a former prosecutor. He has prosecuted death penalty cases in the past. Andy, this alibi, I call it alibi-ish because Brian Koberger's not naming any witnesses who can actually vouch for him. So, what does that mean for this filing?
Well, first of all, the Idaho Criminal Code requires that if you're going to use an alibi defense, you have to file notice of it. This is part of that process. And the whole idea is to put the prosecution really kind of on notice of what it is you're going to try to say. So they can prepare to present rebuttal evidence to deal with whatever that defense is going to be. So typically, from a prosecution point of view, what you like to see with an alibi is, or with a notice of alibi, is some level of specificity. And what I see here is this is just kind of a general plea. Hey, the defendant was out in the country in the middle of the night, looking at the moon, looking at stars. From a prosecutor point of view, I certainly would respond and ask for more specificity. I would ask for specific witnesses who may be able to prove his comings and goings. They did list a witness that they're going to try to use to show where he was through phone records, but I just don't think that that's probably general enough to do what you have to do with respect to the alibi.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to want a specific person who can actually testify to this. That's what I'm guessing they mean by a
So these two individuals obviously are one-sided. They're biased, as you can tell by what they're saying. The individual said he's not certain that the court's going to accept the expert tearing down the prosecution's claim that Mr. Koberger was near the house based on the phone pings. This individual said the prosecution probably gonna actually want a witness that can put eyes on him. And as I was saying last night, we don't know if the defense has that, but the defense, if they have anything that collaborates what the expert is going to try to break down with the metadata, obviously the prosecution has it as well based on the discovery. So they know whether they have a viable witness that could put him out there south of Pullman, whether it be somebody that saw him on a camera, that saw him, on something of that sort. Just because it has not been disclosed, I'm trying to believe that and think that they have something or someone that can collaborate this expert's testimony.
witness, a person that can put you there. I'm also here seeing that they say he was at this favorite spot of his. It's Hawaii Park, and that this became a favorite spot of his as he moved from Washington or from Pennsylvania to Washington in June of 2022. This is somewhere he frequented. He was a night owl, so he would frequently go on these drives, and he actually had photos, including in November of 2022, at the same month of the murders, of the sky and of the moon and the stars. So this guy's out and about at night, late at night, in the early morning hours, according to the defense, taking pictures of the stars.
Why is that so hard to believe? I mean, what makes that so hard to believe that people have to sensationalize that could possibly never be a scenario that could benefit somebody who's accused of a quadruple homicide? What makes that so unbelievable that the individual was out there actually running and hiking or doing whatever he was doing. I mean, like I did a video on this, a stream about what the park looked like. There's plenty of areas. There's plenty of picnic tables. There's landscaping near the water. There's mountains to hike. There's all kinds of stuff to sit there and occupy your time and take up a lot of time. What makes it so hard to believe that this individual could not be enjoying life like all the rest of us do? You know, what makes it so hard to believe that, maybe he went out there to clear his mind because he had a stressful job. He was a TA. He had no friends at that point. He moved out here in June 2022. So he went out there to socialize. What makes that so hard? What makes that so hard to believe? You in the chat, can y'all answer that question for me? What makes that such a difficult concept for people to grasp? They're making it like the defense romanticize his alibi. Like this is just a romanticized alibi based on a Disney movie or something.
Stars and the moon at this park. So does that help him that this is somebody who is out and about at times in the middle of the night?
So I don't think it does. Again, it doesn't provide enough specificity to actually prove that he was somewhere else at the time of the murders. As a matter of fact, when I prosecute cases, I like the notice of an alibi because it kind of tips the defense hands. It kind of shows me what they may or may not do with respect to the case. And there's a couple different things I look for. Number one is you can get a notice of alibi that shows that your defense is going to be, you're just going to throw anything you can against the wall. So, and again, that's kind of what you see here. It's just kind of an absurd story. This guy likes to just go out in the middle of the night and take pictures of the moon and the sky. And look, I'm not saying he does that, but you also have to deal with the fact that his DNA's in the scene. You've got to deal with the fact that he drives the exact same car that we know is over in the area of the murders. And just to say that he was out, the exact same night of the murders, and he's out just driving around the countryside is just absurd. The other thing that I look for with respect to a notice of alibi is a lot of times it can kind of indicate whether or not the defendant's ultimately going to testify in the case. Because I've seen alibi notices where, look, the only way this alibi is going to be able to put forward is if the defendant takes a stand. And what you're seeing here is they put this expert that they're going to try to use to show the phone records. That indicates to me that, again, I don't think this defendant can testify.
I wanted to take a short break from this update on Brian Koberger's case to tell you about something that can help you learn more about the people in your life. It's a great website, and it's called truthfinder.com. Truthfinder is one of the world's largest public records search services. Truthfinder has just one goal. It's to help you and me learn the truth about the people that we meet.
Okay, so this lawyer or whoever this gentleman is, he's finding it absurd that Brian could actually go out there and do what his alibi says. It's almost like he's challenging the alibi. There's nobody to verify your alibi. There's nobody to say otherwise. Your DNA is on a knife sheath. Your trace DNA is on a knife sheath. You drive a vehicle who was supposedly the same type of vehicle that was seen multiple times around the murder scene. And if we're going to go one step further, we have witness testimony in the PCA that she saw an individual that met the characteristics of an individual that could be you. She didn't specifically say enough for it to be you, but there's circumstantial evidence there that it could possibly be you based on height, weight, and bushy eyebrows. Crazy.
% off of confidential background reports at truthfinder.com. So just log on to truthfinder.com. I think that you're right that they are going to use experts because they've kind of said that in the past that they plan to kind of pick things apart through expert testimony. And this is certainly one of them. And they're really, though, Andy, trying to pick apart the probable cause affidavit and what the police have said in the past. They're saying basically the cops were wrong, that his vehicle, according to their expert, this Cy Ray, was not moving east toward Moscow from Pullman on that road that connects the two towns, that he was over there in Whitman County in Washington State where he lived. He was at the park looking at the stars, and that this is something he did all the time. He would go out driving at night. And I can tell you, for one, when I interviewed one of his neighbors, a downstairs neighbor, she actually said he was up late at night all the time, and they were kind of annoyed by it because he would be up late at night vacuuming and stuff like that. So he's certainly a night owl, and I think that they're going to play that up big time, that this is somebody who is up at all hours all the time. This is just who he was.
Look, as a defense team assigned to this kind of case or fighting this kind of case, you have to do the best with the hand that you're dealt. And that's what the defense team is doing in this case. That, again, that they still have, even though they're going to try to use this expert to show that he wasn't east over by Moscow, you still have to deal with the fact that his phone goes dead. He turned his phone off at the time of the murders. So again, how do you even begin to explain that?
How do we know that he turned his phone off? How do we know that? Could his phone have died? I'm just asking for a friend.
As a defense attorney, the exact time that these murders are happening, your client's phone is off. A car that is basically the exact same as his is over in the murder scenes, and your client's DNA is in that scene. Again, you're going to do the best with what you have. You're going to try to argue things like, oh, he was always up late. You know, he was always a night owl. He liked these parks. You're going to play the hand that you're dealt. But ultimately, that is a tall mountain to climb to overcome some of this evidence.
We'll see what they end up doing with it. So do you see Judge allowing them to submit further information? They say that they're still waiting for additional discovery from the state before their expert can complete his analysis so they can finish filling out this alibi. So do you see the judge allowing that, or do you see the judge saying, you know what, this isn't good enough, we're not going to allow an alibi defense at trial?
So if you actually look at the Idaho Criminal Code that governs notice of alibis, it's section 19-519. There's a subsection 5 that basically allows for good cause shown. The judge can make exceptions to the time requirements, to the notice requirements. I do believe that ultimately the judge would probably allow this type of testimony to come into play at a trial. I believe that in these cases, especially in cases that are of this high profile, you're going to see the judge make decisions that certainly are in favor of the defendant being able to present his defense. So I think that both the statute would allow it, and I think the facts and circumstances are probably going to allow this alibi to come in.
We shall see. Andy Wilson, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you back here next time. Brian Koberger, outstar.
Okay, so down with that one right there. Okay, that had a lot of one-sidedness on the side of the media, as we have gotten used to seeing. You know, they push a narrative. They push back on any kind of facts. I'm not pushing one way or the other. I'm merely just stating what they're presenting. What they're presenting.
Who that?
Who is this guy, and how did he get on my stage?
Yeah.
How's it going? How's it going, man?
YAH News Network is going. How are you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. Doing some Idaho 4 stuff tonight.
The 4.
So, any commentary on what you've heard so far on the first video?
Yeah. Since I read the PCA is the exculpatory document that he uses, and his alibi is actually proving that the PCA is going to be his alibi. And as much as he's going to counter, they're countering it, and they got the phone. People forget that the PCA was written off of cell phone tower providers' data, not the actual phone. So when they made their supposed cast, which we do know wasn't done directly by the FBI, but it was done by Officer Payne after he
Right.
talked to cast members, they did it off of cell phone tower info. The phone itself is going to be exact. There is going to be no ambiguity in the phone. So I think anybody that considers his alibi a joke, or they want to laugh that he stargazed, is someone that doesn't understand how to deal with facts. And that applies to all four.
Well, I agree with you on that. Because there's a lot of individuals that are pushing back against this alibi, and that's why I wanted to talk about it tonight. Because to push back on something that you see in black and white, and your perception is still questioning it, that means you lack the critical thinking skills to go past what your mindset can handle. It's like, this is as far as I can go with this because I lack the critical thinking process to even fathom that something different could have taken place.
If you look at this defense, it's actually more accurately described than what this government used to arrest this kid. So
Well,
the
of course.
DNA was not part of the arrest. They've told
No,
the court
not until later, not until they swabbed him after they arrested him.
So the arrest came first with cell tower locations and blurry camera guesses. Nothing in the PCA is as accurate as what she just said. Nowhere in the PCA can they say that Brian Kohlberger's car and Brian and his phone were at any certain location in any of that document. Now, Ann is telling you where he was. He was at Wawa Park, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, I think people that can accept the PCA but not make the transition to the alibi have an agenda. It's not that they can't think like that. It's that they have this agenda.
So, when you hear the alibi, when you hear Ann say, well, he was out stargazing, he was out hiking, he was out doing whatever the individual was doing at that park, that's the part that kind of gets me a little heated, is they're not giving him the humanity that he deserves because he hasn't been tried and convicted of being the killer. So you dehumanize somebody based on an alibi that he gives. So you say, okay, well, that's a silly alibi because what's he doing out there stargazing and taking pictures and walking and hiking? As a society, don't we do that? Don't we all do that? We take selfies, we take pictures of the water, we take pictures of the sun setting, we take pictures of all this stuff happening, but he does it, and therefore that's not good enough.
Well,
And my question to you is, what makes it not good enough for him?
it's interesting that the accusations that got him charged with 4 quadruple homicides have no specificity to them, and they have no definitive point to make. They're claiming cars like his are in that area. They're claiming a car that appeared not to have a license plate. They're not saying that a car with no front license plate and a dark-haired driver was, and you follow what I'm saying? They go right up to the edge of ambiguity, and everything in the PCA is ambiguity. It isn't fact. And yet, when you read what she's saying, and even this news reporter, because I said this a long time ago, that there were people that said Brian Kohlberger was up all the time late at night.
Yes.
and they were interviewed on the news. I'm glad to now know it was this woman that did that interview. But you see, people will not accept, for whatever reason, they love this drama. They love to hate. Most of the audience is just witch hunters. They're terrible people on the internet. These same people may not behave this way inside of a grocery store with you, but you give the people the internet, man, and they turn into a bunch of burn them at the cross lunatics. It's quite shocking, and that's
It's
why I
almost
think
it's
they
almost
can't
like a
accept
cult.
Goldberg.
It's almost like a cult behavior, where
Oh my
you
God, yes.
have, a leader that's pushing the narrative, and they're just feeding the flame every second they get. And that's not what I want to do in this case. I want to show a different perspective, and I hope that I'm doing that in these videos and the commentary and everything that I'm doing, because I'm not wanting to create more doubt. You can only create so much clarity based on the information and the evidence that's presented to you. And the PCA has most of the evidence that was probable cause for his arrest. Whether people like it or whether they don't, that probable cause was signed by a judge. It was kind of seconded by the grand jury. And this is where he's at today, whether he's a killer or whether he's not. That's how it happens. And I'm going to talk about Occam's razor here in a little bit, and we're going to take it to a different arena. And that's why I brought you up, because I want you to introduce one of the theories that you have on the Occam's razor. Do you have to go anytime soon?
Well, my show starts in an hour, so no, an hour and 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So let's get going with this video, and then we'll get into the Occam's razor, because I really like your theory on that.
Brian Koberger was back in court on Tuesday in Idaho for a pretrial hearing, and the 28-year-old arrived not in his orange prison uniform, but in a black suit, and sat quietly while his lawyers pleaded with the judge on several motions before the court. Specifically, they are asking for the judge to force the state to turn over a bunch of investigative information, including backgrounds on some of the police officers involved in the case who may be called to the stand. Koberger's attorney said that the need for this information as quickly as possible is even more crucial now because the state will seek the death penalty if their client is convicted. Now, on Monday, the Latah County DA's office filed paperwork to inform the court that they are considering all penalties for the quadruple murder suspect, including a capital sentence. In their explanation, the state listed several reasons as to why they could make this a capital case, including the fact that the murders were especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity.
Okay, so that right there is written in black and white, right? She's reading it off this, correct? The Idaho Code. Is she
Yeah.
not, Sarge? So whether he did this or somebody else did it, they're liable for the death penalty based on this little 3 sentence,
Right.
especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity.
Which that crime
So
fits.
yes. So whether it was him or whether it was somebody else that's yet to be named, they will be they will be liable for the death penalty based
Right.
on this
And
definition right
we
here.
we can all rest assured that the competence of our government that destroyed that house, okay, will have another suspect if this gentleman is proven innocent or shown. If this gentleman is shown innocent, which I think he is, not just innocent, but I think this guy was nowhere near that location. And once that's established, I think she's going to file a motion for dismissal. And I don't think old Cracker Claus is going to be able to deny it or fight hard enough to stop it from happening. And then we as the public can rest assured that now that the main source of evidence has been destroyed and buried, we'll find the perpetrator. We're on the case.
So let me ask you a question, okay? Since we're talking about the probable cause affidavit, any of the evidence that you saw in that probable cause affidavit that was
No,
probable enough to get him arrested, okay?
there was
Not
no evidence.
indicted, not indicted. I'm talking about arrested. Did any of that PCA meet this 3 sentence to you?
Well, yeah,
Is
not
there
so
any
much the PCA. No. Wait a minute. If you're found guilty of a crime that's especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, and so when charging a person with a crime that matches that, then the death penalty is put on the table because
Well, of course,
right.
but
So
based on the evidence that they have against this man.
the death penalty is appropriate no matter who did this. So yes, based on even if their information turns out to be as flawed as Ann is showing it, then the death penalty should be on the table with him.
Okay,
Until
that's
and there, you know,
that's what I was
yeah,
asking. That's
there's
what I
no,
was
they're
asking.
not stepping outside the legal bounds to go after him
Okay,
for the
so
death penalty.
there would be no reason for them to drop the death penalty and
No,
give him like first degree murder or anything like that, right? That's what I'm asking.
yeah,
So the death penalty is appropriate. Okay.
right.
On the other side, Brian Koberger's defense team is now gearing up for what may literally be the fight of his life, and they're mounting a major defense. Koberger's lawyers claim there is no connection, and that's a quote, between their client and the victims of the Idaho murders. And they don't believe that prosecutors will be able to prove one exists during trial. Clearly, based on the fact that the state is going for the death penalty, they would probably disagree with that there. New court documents are giving us our first clue as to what Brian Koberger's defense strategy will be in court this October as he fights 4 counts of premeditated murder and 1 count of burglary in the stabbing deaths of Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Kernodle.
Okay, how was it premeditated if we found out later on there was no connection to the victims? How's it premeditated?
Well, you don't need to know the victims to premeditate a crime. I
Okay,
could be
but
stalking
you
you
can
right
just
now and you wouldn't know.
so you can just say premeditated based on
No. You've claimed in the PCA that he went there 12 times to surveil the area.
okay.
Okay, that shows premeditation. Well, now we know that's not true. Thank you, Cracker-Coa clause. Now but my point is, sure, you can make that argument if you can support that he stalked or cased the location, right? Like a bank robbery is premeditated if they got video of you watching that bank several times over the course of the month.
Of
So
course.
premeditation is accurate.
But they don't have video. All they have is the pings.
Well,
Unless I'm digging a little deeper right here, Sarge. I'm thinking outside the box. I'm not trying to bait you into saying anything. I'm digging out. I've been thinking about this. If he supposedly came 12 times, logic would state that if he used the same route every time, then you'd have video surveillance all those 12 times of him coming and
you
going.
should be able to identify the car because you would
Yeah.
have a plethora of imagery, right?
Yes, exactly.
And yet they
So
weren't able to do that, were they?
we've never heard of that. We have never heard of that. Would that have been in the PCA if that was, when they were describing the 12? When
People
they were
don't seem to,
okay, go ahead.
people haven't been charged with a crime or haven't been in front of a criminal proceeding before. They don't. This idea that there's secret stuff. Go show me in the Gigolo case where there's secret stuff. Go show me in the Alex Baldwin case. Go show me, even with gag orders. When you're shown the arresting or the accusatory instrument, the pertinent facts to the case are in there. Are there things you don't know? Sure. You don't know which officer carried out the surveillance. You don't know who ordered it. You don't know how long it lasted. You don't know where they went. Sure. But the idea that there's some secret, information that proves beyond a reasonable doubt this kid did it is not going to be hidden. That would have been placed. And I don't care who wants to argue this. You're an idiot to argue this. You're arresting an American citizen with 4 counts of murder. Okay, you want your arresting document to be a home run, not some story like, the Wizard of Oz. I seen a car. It could be a ping. It might be a ping. Dude, that's bullshit. Every time I was arrested, when I tell you they described the crime I committed and my part in it in the arresting document, I'm telling you the truth.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm bringing up here.
Yeah.
Is those 12 times there should have been video surveillance each one of those times. So if we didn't hear about that video surveillance, you know, that just brings up something to me in my brain. Like, okay, if you're going to present evidence, then you're going to present counter evidence attached to that evidence that you're presenting. It's kind of
Well,
like an outline. You have a header,
same,
and then you have subsequent A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Is that not correct?
yes. And listen, they're telling you on the Koberger team, we have a witness. His name is Cy Ray. And he's going to tell you this based on his actual work, scientific work on metadata and other issues, other pieces of information he derived from the phone, including photographs. Okay. They're telling you more. If that's what they said, and that's what they should have said before they arrested this kid, that shouldn't have been cell phone towers. We shouldn't have found out that there was no electronic connection between, there was no connection between Koberger and the victims, electronic or otherwise. We shouldn't have found out a year later. The cops should have
Right.
known that before they arrested the guy.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But now we're finding out, and everybody that speculated from day one that he was stalking the girls on social media, he was the creeper, he was the stalker that was stalking Kaylee, and he was the one that was, around the home and this, that, and the other.
Why wouldn't they have given times and
Now we
locations?
find out that was total BS. That was total BS.
If Koberger can be said to have stalked that home, they would have said that on 12 previous occasions, Mr. Koberger's vehicle is located at the parking lot 787 feet away from the crime scene. And Mr. Koberger could be seen leaving his vehicle. If they had they should have something like that in the arrest warrant, not the bullshit that they have. They should have specificity. That means he likely committed the crime based on these specific facts that we can establish unequivocally. And nothing in that PCA meets that level. That's why I got involved in true crime. This is the first case I ever touched in true crime. And it was the arrest warrant that dragged me in. It just doesn't meet the level of proof. And to think that a magistrate signed that is shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, I've read that PCA countless times, and it sounds like, okay, we got this evidence, but yet we're going to give you a reason why this can't be true, or
Right.
we're going to contradict. We're going to contradict what we're saying is probable cause for him being the guy.
Well, there's a statement in your chat room, and Harsh Reality says a lot of things, and I'm not going to get personal, but most of the creators that are out here don't create anything but drama. They don't create anything but irritation, drama, and ignorance. And so Cy Ray's information is much more, if that was written in the arrest warrant, what Cy Ray says should have been in the arrest warrant, whether it's true or false. Fair enough?
Yeah.
And if Cy Ray were making the argument that's in the PCA on behalf of Brian, you wouldn't accept it, would you? So reverse the two issues. Take Cy's statement, make it the cops, make the cop statement Cy. And where would we be? Not believing Cy, right? Or not believing Koberger.
The fact of the matter is that individual, the Cy Ray guy, is just another player in the puzzle pieces that people are choosing to pick apart. They don't want to believe that he's as much of an expert as his resume calls for. People go to school, they learn certain things, they're trained, they go out and challenge their training, and they continue to be updated with the latest criminal tactics and everything every year. So it's not like this guy is from the 1940s and he's not capable of solving data in 2024. People want to tear down people's expertises because they want to be right. They want to say, well, my thought process is better than an expert process.
Can I just say, in relation to Harsh, he got that from Gitta, but let me tell you, and I posted this and have said this before. Gitta did not think that Judge was going to rule in favor of the defendant on the jury interview. And I said, that if Judge follows the Constitution, he must rule in favor of Brian Koberger. He must. And in fact, he did. Now get us saying that maybe Cy stuff that people are going isn't as good, and that's where Harsh is getting his narrative from. And let me just tell you again, Gitta is wholeheartedly wrong. And this guy does give us a lot of good information, but he's wrong. He was wrong. I said in the beginning, when they ran around and indicted him, the instant the indictment was announced, I said that Ann was going to appeal that indictment. And what have they done? They've gone to appeal it, have they not?
Yes.
Okay. So when you have the experience of the courts, when you've been a part of the court system and you know what they do, then you can actually look at cases that aren't even related to what you went through. And I understand the process Mr. Koberger is going through. I understand what the police are doing. I was arrested and charged with possession in the 7th degree and the drug pocket, and you and I were walking down the street. And they imprisoned me. They jailed me and charged me with that. And I proven that possession would mean within my imminent domain. And the shit was in your pocket, 12 gauge. And they not only had to let me go, but they had to give me $10,000 for arresting me. So, to think that the police get it right and they're is insane. They get it wrong as often as they get it right.
Of course. But I don't believe that an expert with as much history behind this guy, it's just somebody that they picked up off the street, and it's just going to go in there and do the worst case possible. He's not Gabriela Vargas. You could tell by her testimony that she wasn't much of an expert, and they failed in that regard. So I'm sure that they're not going to chance another debacle with this guy.
Listen, I said Brian Koberger is going to be he's going to be on the witness stand, and the reason I say that is, and I think it's imperative in this case, is there's nobody to humanize him to the jury but himself. Right. So who he just moved out there. Nobody knows him. He's got no experience with any of the locals. There's nobody there that's going to stand up. Maybe the teacher, but these people are going to try to stay out of the limelight, right? Because they're locals. Right. So who humanizes Brian Koberger to the world? And for that reason, I believe Mr. Koberger will be. Yeah. What's that?
You see it? Says Sergeant Friday. Cletus said, "Shut the fuck up so we can play the video."
Tell Cletus to get that pineapple up out of his ass, and we'll go forward.
Hi, Cletus. How y'all doing? Cletus, Cluminati, thank you for being in here.
They were on a 5-hour chat today where they couldn't shut up, and they're going to come in here and tell me I talk too much.
Let's go ahead and get on with the defense strategy.
For months that a knife sheath was left at the crime scene. It was discovered to the right of Maddie Moken's body. It was buttoned side down, partially underneath of her and the comforter. On the snap of that K-bar sheath, investigators found a single source of DNA, which they matched to Brian Koberger. According to prosecutors, the DNA is 5.37 octillion times more likely to belong to Brian Koberger than any random person off the street. That evidence objectively sounds not great for the defense, but the suspect and his team are working to neutralize this DNA evidence, and they're coming at it from all angles, including the possibility that they believe it could have been planted. In their own words, the DNA discovered at the scene and how it was tested is, quote, extremely important to the defense in this case. I am not a lawyer, but I've been reporting on these types of cases for more than a decade. It sounds to me like they are trying to put together a solid objection to the DNA evidence being admitted at all at trial, which would be fascinating to see at court. If the jury never gets to hear that Koberger's DNA was found at the crime scene, on the item that likely held the murder weapon and touching one of the victim's bodies, well, it would be a crushing blow to the prosecution. Back in an earlier video, I spoke to attorney Nima Rahmani, who correctly predicted that Koberger's team would attack the DNA evidence at trial, and that is exactly what we are seeing unfold.
The defense is going to attack the evidence in this case, and one thing that I expect them to do is attack the DNA, say it's not reliable, it's only one source, and it could have been transferred there by anyone, and there's going to be a whole host of other people that have DNA there. They're also going to attack the other key evidence cited by the prosecution. We know the cell site evidence is key, but the defense is already trying to poke holes in that, saying that the cell phone evidence doesn't match up with the video surveillance of the white Hyundai Elantra, maybe minutes off. So all the defense can do in a case like this is raise reasonable doubt. So whatever they can do to attack the prosecution's key evidence, that's what they're going to do. They're going to put up factual roadblocks as well as legal hurdles as well. That's why you see them attacking everything, whether it's pushing for a gag order in this case, or going through a full preliminary hearing. We're going to see approximately a week of witness testimony. They're not going to waive preliminary hearing in a case like this. They're going to do everything they can to try to win this case by raising a reasonable doubt with one or more jurors, or even on appeal.
So how are they going to do this? Not to get too into the weeds with the legal jargon, the argument right now between the defense and the prosecution is all about discovery. According to the American Bar Association, discovery is the formal process of exchanging information between the parties about the witnesses and evidence they will present at trial. The reason this rule exists is to prevent trial by ambush, basically to avoid those gotcha moments that we love on Law & Order. Every defendant is innocent until proven guilty and has a constitutional right to a fair trial. The discovery process helps guarantee that. So how does all of that specifically relate to the Idaho murder case? Well, Kohberger's lawyers believe that prosecutors have information that should be by law disclosed to the defense. The defense is claiming that Latah County prosecutors are withholding specific information, which is effectively, quote, hiding its entire case. The main issue that Kohberger's team is focusing on has to do with the DNA that investigators discovered on the snap of that knife sheath. The DNA was first run through the law enforcement database CODIS, but it didn't get a hit. Now, at the time, all law enforcement knew about that profile was that it belonged to someone genetically male. That was it. According to prosecutors, law enforcement then turned to investigative genetic genealogy to craft a family tree in the hopes of finding a lead. The FBI actually handled out building the suspect profile's family tree. They did it using public resources, the same way you or I would utilize services like 23andMe or Ancestry.com, as well as some databases available only to law enforcement. FBI investigators ended up coming up with a network of hundreds of people related to the suspect, and were able to then narrow that list down to Bryan Kohberger. How they narrowed it down to him is a huge question that the defense has. But at any rate, the FBI sent that tip to local law enforcement and told them to look into the WSU graduate student. From there, local authorities dug into Kohberger to piece together enough evidence of his potential guilt to secure an arrest warrant. The most crucial piece of that evidence was a different DNA sample than the one we've just been talking about. This one was taken from Bryan Kohberger's father. It was obtained from an item in the family's trash and matched with a 99.998% accuracy to being from the father of the sample left on the knife sheath. Translation: the sample on the sheath was Bryan Kohberger's. After Kohberger was arrested, his DNA was taken by law enforcement via a cheek swab and then finally compared against that original sample from the knife sheath. I know this sounds like a lot, and I've actually left out the really tedious sciencey stuff, but I've spoken to experts who have pointed out that this DNA evidence could be the difference between a guilty or not guilty verdict. This is why it is paramount for Kohberger's team to poke holes in its authenticity if they want to have any shot of him walking free. Now, they don't seem to be disputing that the touch DNA on the sheath belongs to Kohberger. They seem to be preparing to tear down the science around how it was tested and how it got there to begin with. And the prosecution is trying to keep secret some of that genetic genealogy information.
Yes, because that's what they've been asking for in 15 motions, correct? How did you get it? How did you get to my client? How did you get to my client? And they failed to answer that. And they might not even use the DNA, and if
Well,
they
the
don't,
DNA was not, they've already established the DNA was not how they got to Kohberger. The judges made the point in the court twice to say that. Remember, the probable cause affidavit did not use any genealogical or any DNA. They had no Kohberger DNA at that point.
no, they
So
didn't.
the only reason, that's what she's saying. How did you conclude it was my client based on essentially blurry, questionable videos of some cars and cell phone tower locations, which are the most inaccurate way to discover where somebody is when you're using a single tower? You don't got the, in other words, so how did that skimpy shit turn into Bryan Kohberger is what she's basically asking the court. And I think that question needs to be answered like yesterday.
Well, that seems to be the part of the discovery that they're unwilling to hand over.
Right. They're holding it close to the prosecution thinks that they can ignore giving it or hold off long enough gets forgotten. And Ann's
Yeah,
getting blamed.
they've been withholding a lot, according to the latest. She said in the latest one, she's gonna, you know, state what they've been withholding, what exculpatory evidence against her client.
Right. She
Isn't that
made
what she said?
not exactly that, but she's saying that if the state will not provide its cast information, that Ray will show where it's either been not preserved or misplaced. In other words, you guys are using it in your accusations, yet you can't produce it.
Right. And like we've said all along, the FBI has always stated, hey, this was a tip. We're helping you out here. We're giving you the tip. But if you ever decide to use this in court,
Don't.
yeah, don't mention us. Don't
Yeah.
mention us. Don't say we gave it. We gave you this information. We don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah, it's tragic what's happened in this case, and the very cops that were involved with the false accusation of murder by a chiropractor are the same cops involved in this case.
Exactly.
And
Let's
it's
finish
funny
the
that
video.
the outrage lovers don't want to talk about any of that. Why aren't they examining? It's almost like people set their sights on a victim, and no matter what, they won't let go. Doesn't matter if it's this case or the Rogers case or any case. Once popular opinion finds a target, they bite into it like a pit bull and won't let go.
Yeah.
Information. And their reasons are twofold. One, the majority of the workflow is done by the FBI inside of online portals on the websites. Prosecutors say they didn't document their work or print things out on their way to that family tree. So they say the documentation the defense wants doesn't exist. And second, there's a desire to protect the identities of the hundreds of relatives whose information was used to help populate the family tree. The state wants a judge to issue an order of protection for this information, meaning that they wouldn't have to turn it over to the other side. But in court documents, the defense essentially calls BS on the whole argument and instead wants the judge to compel the state to release all of that information. Here is how one attorney on Kohberger's team put it. The defense is to guess whether the state focused its investigation on Mr. Kohberger via a bizarrely complex DNA tree experiment or through its faulty identification of the vehicle involved in the case. And what they're asking for here is pretty illuminating too. Some of the discovery that Kohberger's team wants includes things like emails and texts regarding biological testing in the investigation and information on all the lab personnel who worked on the case. Now, at the top of the video, I mentioned the theory that Kohberger's DNA could have been planted on the knife sheath. I personally don't buy it, but in court documents, Team Kohberger seems to suggest just that. This is how they worded it. What the state's argument asks this court and Mr. Kohberger to assume is that the DNA on the sheath was placed there by Mr. Kohberger and not someone else during an investigation that spans hundreds of members of law enforcement and apparently at least one lab the state refuses to name. One other avenue that the defense is looking into regarding the DNA profiles is the possibility of other relatives who might be similar to Mr. Kohberger. That sounds like they're going to suggest that the knife sheath DNA could belong to someone related to Brian Kohberger and not Brian specifically. Again, this feels like a huge leap to me, but according to his lawyers, this line of thinking, quote, is extremely important to the defense in this case. Now, all of this really boils down to one major defense strategy that I believe his team will cling to. Their belief that law enforcement already had their sights set on Kohberger and then made the investigation work towards proving their predetermined theory. They write, a massive investigation came to focus on him and him alone. The state appears to be trying to hide its original domino such that he cannot discover why. The defense also plans on attacking the investigation on another front by pointing out instances where they believe law enforcement ignored other potential suspects. 3 additional male DNA profiles were discovered in and around the crime scene, 2 in the house and 1 on a glove found outside a few days after the murders. Like Kohberger, these DNA profiles didn't get any hits in CODIS. All of these seem suspicious at first blush and definitely warranted further investigation. A glove certainly could have belonged to the killer, and the 2 other male DNA profiles were discovered, quote, where the deceased were located. Pretty big leads if you ask me. And as far as
Okay, so those three other DNA samples that they found, we've never really heard any kind of answer for that at all.
Right.
You know,
Wait to find out.
we've never heard if there was a hit in CODIS on any of them.
No, we
One of
never heard
the
if they were transferred DNA or not. What if it was a hair? What if it was sweat? What if it was blood? We don't even know what the other two DNA samples consist of. Do
yeah, this tunnel vision is sad. If I believe that there wasn't really a frame, I don't believe that they framed him. I believe more in the context that they got tunnel visioned and they
we? Right.
built their case backwards.
And they know they got it wrong, and they're doing the same thing here they did with the chiropractor murder,
Yes.
right?
Yes, but this is a death penalty case. I mean, what are they going to do? Kill him and then say, "Oops, we got it wrong"?
Well, those people that work this case in Idaho are no different than most of the people on the internet. It's just another day at the world of entertainment. Everything in the world is entertainment, and these prosecutors and these policemen, they don't want to be wrong, and so the consequences to others don't affect them. And let's be fair, okay, 12 gauge. What happened to those 4 victims does not affect your or my life. Period. End of story.
No, it
It just
doesn't.
doesn't, right? Okay, and a lot of people, especially in the positions that these people find themselves in this that prosecution, that's how they view their work.
Of course. Just kind of like the YouTube community, they went hard and heavy on this, and they found a newer, shinier penny that they're spending all their time with right now. This is old news. They couldn't
You know,
figure it out. They couldn't figure it out. They got tired of talking about it, and they didn't want to dig deeper to try to understand it. So they went to try to attack something else that is on the surface level, easier to put your head around.
can I just say this? And I think this is in every one of these particular cases, this example needs to be made. Every single person that believed the information given to them by the authorities proves Koberger is guilty. Every single one of them to the last.
Yeah.
Has said and will continue to say there's evidence we don't know about. And he's guilty. And so they go for it's like the same people that argue there's no such thing as God are the same thing people arguing about invisible evidence. Do you see what I mean?
But didn't Thompson say they got about 95% of the discovery? So if they have 95, huh?
Yeah, but
He said
I think no. What I'm saying is when it comes to the viewer, it comes to the cops.
well, I get what you're
They
saying
believe
on
what's
that.
in front of them, and these people running around here saying there's evidence that they have that we don't know about is just it's like the invisible man in the sky is out there, and he is going to prove one day that Koberger did it. This invisible evidence. My point is they don't argue the facts. They will not accept the facts, especially when Ann contradicts the alleged facts. They then resort to this if or possibly this invisible unknown information is going to be on their side.
Well,
It's quite the conundrum that you see yourself in on true crime on the internet.
they could have got the car wrong. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. They could have got tunnel vision on the car.
What if this other DNA is a fingernail broken off from somebody? What if it's hair? What if it's blood or saliva? These other 3 samples of
Well, the
DNA.
video that I posted last night, it was talking about blood being found on the mattress that has never been really discussed. There was stuff found on that mattress that was viable enough for them to package it up and take it with them.
Okay.
So obviously there was something on that mattress that piqued their interest.
See,
You know what I mean?
right. And look, we know for a fact they've told us there are 3 other male DNA. So when we say they haven't told us the nature of the DNA, so
Right.
that DNA could be the same as Koberger's transfer or touch DNA, or it could be hair, it could be saliva, it could be skin, it could be fingernails, it could be many things that are actually not transfer DNA. In other words, those other 3 samples could be blood. So when when I say what if it is, I'm basing it off a reality, a fact. The fact is there's 3 other DNAs. Nobody has told us what kind of DNA it is. So it could be all different. It could be any DNA, right? Transfer, blood, semen,
Molecular,
sweat,
yeah.
spit.
It's anything that's not trace is molecular, right? It's
Right.
so if it's any of those, they know who these people are. Are they
No.
waiting to see? I mean, are they
They don't
waiting
know
to
who it
see?
is. They just know that they're not in CODIS. They only tested them through the criminal database. They don't
Well,
know who
surely
the
they
other
know.
right?
Surely they know if they're male or female, right?
Right. Yeah, that they can determine, but not identity of the individual. Like they can't say
Well,
it's you or
that's
me.
what I meant. That's what I meant. They know whether they're male or female.
Right.
Let's
Right. And
finish this.
that's evidence you would suspect that they would want to pursue before they went after Kohlberger like this, but they didn't do it.
Because they were on a deadline.
And they were on a tunnel vision. They had what they
Spring
thought was enough to go
semester-
forward.
The spring semester is starting. We can't have this murder case looming over our heads when the new class comes in to come to class here.
As we or the defense are aware, it's not clear whose DNA that is. It is possible, however, that the identities have been discovered and police ruled those people out as suspects, or that the type of DNA and where it was located was deemed irrelevant. Here's what I mean by that. Here's an example of how DNA evidence could seem really important, not so much. Skin cells under a victim's fingernail is a lot different from an investigative standpoint than some saliva on the lip of a solo cup of old beer. Remember, this is a big house, 6 bedrooms, multiple roommates. Kaylee and Maddie both had boyfriends, and 1122 King Road was a party house. These images taken of the crime scene shows the home exactly as it was the night of the murders. Look at the mess: empty cups, bottles, dirty dishes, the remnants of beer pong. There's no doubt a ton of DNA in this house. It will likely be the state's case at trial that the other DNA profiles found at the scene aren't relevant to the case. Team Kohlberger, however, will want to disagree. And so in order to do this, they need the information, the discovery, ahead of time so that they can plan. And that is what they're asking for. Now, to be clear, the prosecution plans on handing all of this discovery over. They're just on different timetables. We also know now, based on this new information, that police did run down several possible suspects during the course of their investigation, not just Kohlberger. The defense says that DNA samples were taken from several people, including one person whose sample was surreptitiously taken from a discarded cigarette. Looks to me like Kohlberger's lawyers are looking for any entry points to say, look, it wasn't our guy, could have been this guy or that guy. Remember, they don't need to offer an alternative suspect or prove Kohlberger's innocence. Their only job in defending their client is to show reasonable doubt. If a single juror says to themselves, well, it might have been cigarette guy, it could be the difference between Kohlberger spending life in prison or walking out of court.
Did you hear that, audience? Did you hear what she just said? This is the basis of this whole trial right here. Right here.
The job in defending their client is to show reasonable doubt. If a single juror says to themselves, well, it might have been cigarette guy, it could be the difference between Kohlberger spending life in prison or walking out of court a free man. And these latest court filings are really a huge window into Kohlberger's defense strategy. Another place they're looking to poke holes in is the now infamous white Hyundai Elantra.
The white Hyundai.
We know police were searching for a white Hyundai Elantra for weeks prior to Kohlberger's arrest. It was one of the only solid leads that law enforcement went public with. And according to investigators, it was seen in the vicinity of the crime scene no less than 12 times in the months leading up to the murders. And on the night of the slayings, it was tracked using CCTV footage from Kohlberger's apartment in Pullman, Washington, to 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. Then spotted essentially casing the house, driving back and forth around the area 3 times in the wee hours of the night, and disappearing briefly during the time frame of the killings, and then seen again, leaving the area at a high rate of speed at 4:20 a.m. That is after the time that the 4 victims were believed to have been stabbed to death. The car was impounded in Pennsylvania the day the suspect was arrested and has gone through rigorous forensic testing. How the car was first identified remains a mystery to the defense, and like with the DNA, they're demanding answers. Now, Koberger's lawyers want to know exactly how police were able to identify specifically a white Hyundai Elantra based off of these blurry images of a white sedan. They also claim that the analyst working on this was heavily relying on a video of a car heading in the wrong direction at the wrong time. Now, beyond that, they don't dive too much more into the car in these latest documents or in court. But one final line at the end of the defense's argument hit me like a ton of bricks, because it suggests that the state's case might not be as strong as we all thought. His lawyer writes, there is no explanation for the total lack of DNA evidence from the victims in Mr. Koberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. I don't know if this is just bluster or if it's fact or if the discovery of some of this evidence just has not been turned over yet. We will have to wait and see at trial. And we will see it. Last week, the judge ruled that cameras will be allowed in the courtroom for the Koberger case. For now, that might change. As for the motions before the court on Tuesday, Judge John Judge, yes, his name is Judge Judge, he will rule on those in the coming days, and dailymail.com will have the updates. For more.
Okay, for those of you that are kind of still stuck in your mindset about certain things, if you listen to everything she said right there, it tells you a lot on what could potentially be asked in court, how it could be
like,
rebutted, things of that nature, what areas they're going to go towards. At no point in any of these videos that I've shown have you heard Banfield, Linda Lane,
reflection,
Tunnels, or any of the three police cams for the parties that they showed up at. None of that. They haven't discussed any of that. So that means that those areas are null and void. That is just kind of like throwing food at the piranhas, giving them something to eat while to leave us alone, to leave us alone to do our investigation. Let's give them something to chew on. Let's give them something to decipher, to make them feel like they're really cracking the case. While internally, they're not really saying much else. Really quickly, before your show goes on, I want to do the Occam's razor, and then I'll do
let me just say that woman says the exact same words in the exact same way I've been saying them for months. That woman could be a female version of me when she tells you what she's telling you in that video, because I've been quoting the exact same factual information forever. In the same way that she does it. A car going the wrong way at the wrong time on the wrong road. Right? I mean, this woman hit all the defense's points. And to this point in time, none of those have been countered. And actually, the stalking and the other 12 trips and all the other crap that everybody's ran around with to hang this kid have been destroyed by Cracker Claus himself at that last hearing with the survey, where Koberger we're told that he was not stalking the victims. That supports that statement. There's no connection between Brian Koberger and the victims, electronic or otherwise. Cracker Claus proves that. So, yeah, I love that. I don't know where you got that video, but save that video. These last two you had in the show, don't lose them.
I have them. I got them. But let me say something else before we get to the Oakland Razor. Anybody who's still in the chat, I don't know if there's anybody in there still or if anybody's even watching, but if you watch this on replay or anything of that nature, you should take note of the evidentiary value of an investigation versus what people are pushing on YouTube. Most of the creators are not pushing evidence. They're pushing speculation. They're pushing what they feel, what they think. And at the end of it, you always hear them say one phrase. And I've watched enough of them for them to say this one phrase. You know what that phrase is? Blah, 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 but I don't know. That last part right there, blah, 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 but I don't know. So that tells you that that's not evidence. Because if it's evidence, then you can hang your hat on it. You can recall it in a document. You can recall it in a motion. You can bring it up and say, look, this is the evidence that they have. You don't have to guess. You don't have to say, why, I believe this is what they said happened. They drug them from a tunnel into the house, positioned them. I fell for all that. I fell for all that. I'm man enough to say it. I fell for all that crap. That there could have been tunnels, that Kaylee was shot in the face with a bean gun, beanbag gun, this, that, and the other. I fell for all that. I'm man enough to sit here and say it. But as I've furthered into my criminal justice studies, I'm kicking myself in the rear for even entertaining any of that crap because it's not evidence. It's not evidence that can be proven in court. You're not going to talk about Banfield in court. You're not going to talk about the 3 individuals that were getting tickets and what the cops were doing while they were giving them tickets or any of that stuff in court. You're not. That's not the crime scene. The crime scene is the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor, and possibly the backyard, and maybe some of the front yard, based on any kind of evidence that they found in those areas. They might have not have found anything. The crime scene was not the fire hydrant with that black coat on it. That was not the crime scene. You have to be mindful of collecting evidence. And I've done videos on this because I was hoping that people would engage in those videos enough to teach themselves different things so that they don't fall for the narrative of the creators that are pushing this BS. Well, I know this person, I know Koberger's family, blah, blah, blah. What that have to do with the crime?
Nothing. Let's get to your OCOM Razor question because it's 8:34 here.
Okay, I'm getting long-winded like somebody else I know.
I can't even imagine who that could be.
I don't know. Let's get the basic definition and then let's get your theory.
Go
Short.
through, go. The hell happened?
Hold on a second. I forgot to share it with
Occam's razor, all things being equal, the simplest solution tends to be the best one. That's one statement.
Okay, let's say it a little clearer. All things being equal, the simplest solution tends to be the best one. So, can you break that down, Sarge, really quick, really simple?
I think it's the simplest one is that's not hard to understand. So what, and also what's the most common solution to the same problem? Problems usually have solutions. They fit into patterns, the successful pattern and a failure pattern. So it's one or the other, but I don't think you can even simplify what the guy said. It's so self-explanatory. The simplest solution tends to be the best one. And what's the simplest solution for the Koberger case?
Yes. It says, when faced with 2 equally good hypotheses, always choose the simpler. That's based on law enforcement logic. It's based on when you're collecting evidence, you're always going to tend to go to the simpler solution.
Right.
So was Koberger the simplest solution in this case?
Not even close.
Go ahead and give us your...
Not even close. In a case like this, you would want to start with the survivors, and you would really want to bear down on just exactly what these folks did and did not do with clarity. You don't want to walk away with any assumptions. You want to clear them like you want your windshield wipers to clear your windshield when they work, correct? You don't want to leave any streaks behind or any water. And you need to run these 2 survivors explicitly as the top suspects. And it does not appear in any way, shape, or form that they handled Dylan and Bethany in that manner.
Okay, what we have here in these two thought bubbles, this is the YouTube side where my mouse is. Can you see my mouse? This is the YouTube
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
From A
yeah.
to B, you're going through all these fires and all these trails and
UFOs and
spaceship,
Bigfoots.
yes, to get to B.
Mhm.
Occam's razor is from A to B. This is the simplest explanation.
Right.
So in this case, how were these four people murdered in the simplest form?
Yes, and that would be with Dylan Morrison's involvement, allegedly, by my analysis of what I see. Her involvement seems to be the key. That to me is the focal point of where this investigation should have been. Not looking at outside sources coming in, unless the outside sources coming in are looked at through the lens of being connected to Dylan. Period. And you must eliminate all of them conclusively, not by reasonable doubt, but by absolute concrete evidence. None of the people involved in that had any connection to Dylan, nor did Dylan's actions that night have any connection to the murders. You must prove that solid before you move on to your next lead. And they did not do this.
No, they did not, because they were the closest, simplest explanation. In her explanation of the killer, it put her there, but it distanced her enough for them to get tunnel vision, in my opinion.
Yep. Well, the magnitude of the crime just seems like a woman couldn't do that. And I say, bullshit.
Well, even explaining this to my little nephew last night, and he has not been following this the whole time. You know what he told me? He said the woman probably had the guy that was, which would have been Koberger, crushing on her. You know, he would have been somebody close to her. So she could have done the crime and blamed it on him because he was the closest one in proximity. Not that it happened that way, but that's what he said. And it made a lot of sense to me. I've never thought of it that way. If you want to get somebody away from you, I mean, you blame a quadruple murder on them, right? I mean, that sounded pretty.
You got
Pretty
someone in the chat room that's got us. They've got a basic line of reasoning, but they refuse to accept that anybody in the house. Your first suspect is Dylan. Dylan places herself at the scene, before the scene. Dylan is the woman that invited somebody up to be her first. Dylan is the one that was intimately involved with the two victims upstairs that night. Dylan also is the one that was there during the crime. Dylan reports about the crime. And then Dylan is the one involved in finding the second floor murders. And then connected to, not directly, but connected to also the notification of the police. And every step of the way, Ms. Morrison is completely neck deep in this. Period.
Okay. Okay, so since okay, just saying that this right here, simplest is the one person did these four killings. The person came into the house and did it. Okay, that is the simplest, right? You said no.
No, it's not the simplest. That's more complicated than Dylan doing it. She was in the house already.
Okay, so A to B. A to B
would be Dylan, not someone coming in from outside.
And that's what I'm trying to get across to you individuals in the chat rooms and anybody that could potentially watch this from here on out. A to B is the most simplest thing. So A to B would say that Bethany and Dylan were the closest to the proximity of the crime.
Right.
They should have been investigated thoroughly if they weren't. If they were, then, I don't know how they fooled these cops, but they are the closest to the proximity of the crime.
Yeah, I can make a stronger case against Dylan Morrison than you can in your anybody's wildest imagination with Brian Koberger. The complexities to make it Koberger are significant. They are UFO, Bigfoot. Dylan, you can make an argument that would explain that without any effort at all. It would be a straight line explanation to say her involvement was real.
Let's hear it right quick. I mean, that's why I want
to that Dylan had the opportunity. Is it a coincidence that this girl, the fourth victim, that no longer lived there was there that night? Is it a coincidence that that person was there for the benefit of Dylan? Is it a coincidence that that girl was actually not with Dylan that night, but upstairs with her best friend, sleeping in the same room? Is that situation starting to look like a crime of passion? Could that situation be viewed that way? And the answer is absolutely. Right? And you could continue on this daisy chain and keep making points that surround Dylan's own words and actions that point to her involvement of some level. And it's much easier to make those conclusions if you just stop, get your prejudice out of your head that women can't do these things. What's wrong with people? You guys want to learn about women? Go talk to Cluminati. She'll give you a straight scoop on how women can be. Right?
Well, I mean, in retrospect, it's not about strength, it's about precision. You don't have to be strong to stab somebody. The knife is doing the job for you. People have that misconception that you got to be the Hulk in order to do some of these stabbings that were done. It's about precision. If you know any killing spots or any areas of incapacitating somebody, that's all you need to know.
Right.
The knife does the rest.
Yeah, go back and look at that 12 gauges his stream on knife wounds and what happens to the body and how you become incapacitated, and that your ability to fight back is highly diminished depending on where that knife strike takes place. You stick somebody in the upper shoulder, you can incapacitate that whole left side of the body. Fair enough? You don't know. We don't know. And the autopsy may or may not be able to tell you. But so you're right. It's not a matter of, look at mothers have been said that to lift cars off their kids. Right? You just, when you're enraged or something happens and that fight or flight thing kicks in and that primal instinct takes over, there's no limit to what people are capable of. We are a very fucked up group.
Well, the reality is too, as it was not mentioned in the PCA, where Miss Mortensen was that night. So people's assumption that she was intoxicated, that she was drugged up, all that stuff is just speculation. Nobody knows whether she was sober or whether she was any of that other stuff. Nowhere has it been stated that. They got that based on this is a party house, so everybody that sleeps in here must do drugs and drink all the time.
Let me ask you a question. If you're willing to assume that a blurry picture identifies that as Koberger's car, why aren't you willing to question somebody in a home where 4 horrific homicides took place, didn't hear nothing? You accept that. You won't accept that. You won't question that. But some blurry ass picture of a white car is all you need to say that's Koberger's car.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what kind of thought process do people not engage? They don't use their head anymore. They use their emotions and their willingness to believe a narrative.
Kind of like with the Sebastian Rogers case right now. They're willing to believe that the stepfather had something to do with it,
right,
but failing to believe that the father could ever have anything to do with it. And I don't know that case well enough, and I don't care to know it, to know beyond that. But look at it this way. Most of the murders and disappearances and abductions and all these other things, it has been proven that usually the person who is the closest in proximity to these individuals is the one that does it.
Right.
That's why they interview the boyfriend, the husband, the stepfather, the mother, the people that are in close proximity, the brother, the sister, whoever, because these people are the closest in proximity to check them off the list.
Exactly.
And she could have been checked off that list. But what to say that Moscow dropped the ball on that as well.
So, all right, I'm going to jump down here. And I think Occam's razor is great. And I think it needs to be applied to both sides of the argument, guilt or if, and we shouldn't even be looking to see if Koberger's guilty. That's not our job. Even if you're on a jury, it's not that you're looking for guilt. What you're looking for is evidence that holds water. And whatever that evidence is the way you go. And if it is guilty, then it is guilty because the evidence shows that. but you're not really determining guilt or innocence in essence. You're actually, what you're supposed to do is review the information and come to a conclusion. What does the information tell you? And is it verifiably provable by fact? Is there a dent or a nick or something on that kid's car that shows that the images that the prosecution possessed make it his car? What identifiable feature uniquely makes it his? And if you can't do that, then it can't be his car. You can think it is all you want, but if there's no identifiable fact, then that car is not valid evidence. That video imagery is useless. It can't be part of your summation as to your decision. So it'll be interesting. I think a jury. I don't think it'll get to a jury, and honestly, they're going to dismiss this case before it gets that far.
I've always felt that way as well, but who knows?
Who knows? Well, I love that you brought me up here and I got to talk so damn much, no matter what Cluminati says.
Well, you know what? I talk a lot also. It's interesting that you and I can coexist on a panel and still get our thought process out.
It's awesome, man. I appreciate you having me up here. You're awesome, 11+1.
Hey, no problem. I'm about to hop off here myself because I'm going to lose half my chat because they're going to go over to your stream. So I'm going to end it. I'm going to end it for tonight. But thank you so much.
Can I just say that I have a special guest up on that stream tonight?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have Truth Not Feelings coming up on the stream tonight. It's arranged by my super moderator queen. It's the YAH News Network. Come on over. Just don't come on me.
Well, why don't you plug my channel as well while you're over there? You can plug my channel.
Yeah, bring your link with you. Are you coming in or no?
No, I'm not coming in tonight.
All right, we'll definitely promote the 12 Gauge channel.
All right, I appreciate that, buddy. Hey, you guys in chat, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your comments. We don't have to agree. We can agree to disagree because, even though we present something up here that's different, we don't know it all either. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, but an educated mind tells certain things about the evidence that's been presented that we can see it in a different light. You know what I mean? So try to be open-minded enough when you come in here to try to think a little differently and try to open your mindset a little bit to what either I'm saying or whatever guest I might have up here is saying, because none of us are wrong and none of us are right. We're equal in the perspective that we're all just trying to figure out what's going on. Hopefully that you use some of the information that have on my channel to educate yourself on other cases that may be coming up so that you can challenge the narrative. You can be educated and say, no, that's not right. That's not the law. That's not science. That's not how you conduct a crime scene. That's not how you conduct evidence. That's none of that. So hopefully some of the videos on there can educate you and get you to a different state of mindset. If not, thank you for coming by. Hope to see you again soon. Maestro, cue the music.